Faith is front and center on the Texas race for the U.S. Senate. On one hand, we have the Republicans that are fighting, the last two Republicans standing to try to get the nomination. We have John Cornyn, the incumbent, the man who just for transparency up front, I don't like him. We have Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton trying to unseat him with or without the help of President Trump. This has turned into a flashpoint for Texas, for the Republican Party, for the MAGA movement, because obviously you have on one hand you have a guy that has been very dedicated in Ken Paxton, very dedicated to President Trump, to MAGA, who deserves President Trump's endorsement. Unfortunately, he also comes with some baggage, and he's got a lot of enemies within the Republican Party that are prompting President Trump to shy away from him. On the other hand, you have John Cornyn, who has been a never Trumper the entire time. The entire time. Okay, this is a guy who he's slick. He's been willing to throw President Trump under the bus. He's been very. I'm not going to detail all that. You can look that up. Okay, if you don't know, John Cornyn is a snake, a rhino, a bad dude as far as the MAGA movement and as far as America and as far as Texas is concerned, then it's time to educate yourself. I'm not going to do that. I want to focus on the faith aspect of it. And a story that came out, that was originally posted, I believe, over at National Pulse. We have it currently over at conservativeplaybook.com. Cornyn launches, quote, Faith Advisory Council featuring pastors tied to Soros-funded pro-amnesty groups. I mean, because of course he does. You know, he's trying to protect his job, and he says, "Hey, let's throw out the faith card." And who does he get? He gets the rhino equivalent of evangelicals. I'm not going to read the whole article. You can find this again over at conservativeplaybook.com. But from the bullet point, Senator John Cornyn launched a Faith Advisory Council on March 10th as part of his evangelical outreach effort ahead of the May Republican primary runoff against Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. 3 of the council members, Dr. Jack Graham, Pastor Max Lucado, and Dr. Gus Reyes, are affiliated with the Evangelical Immigration Table, the EIT. This is a group that advocates for chain migration and pathway to citizenship for illegal aliens. We're talking about Texas here, okay? This isn't California. This isn't purple areas like Arizona or New Mexico or Nevada. This should be, I still believe that Texas should be considered red. And yet, constantly we hear, and we've been hearing this for years, about how Texas is about to flip. Texas is about to flip. Texas is close to being purple. Texas is going blue. Well, this might be it, folks. This might be the year because, again, we're faced with the potential of having a rhino versus. I'm going to be talking about his Democrat competitor here soon because he is dangerous on a global scale. Okay, and he's not just dangerous for Texas. He's not just dangerous politically. This man may represent the tip of the spear when it comes to the destruction of the Christian faith here in the United States of America, and that is not hyperbole. But let's focus on. Just going to drop that, and then that's your teaser to stay tuned for the next segment of today's podcast. But anyway, back to Cornyn. He gets these guys in there, and he's running in Texas, and he gets these guys in there that are pushing for pathways to citizenship for illegal aliens, pushing for chain migration, all about birthright citizenship. You take every left-leaning component. I'm not talking about open borders. I'm not talking about radical leftist ideas. These guys aren't crazy, but they do lean very much to the center and to the left of center. We're not just talking about, we should just focus on deporting the criminals, and we should find some way to figure it out for the people that are here who've been here for I disagree with those sentiments, but at least that's sort of like milquetoast centrist, Whereas what these guys are promoting are to the left of center. These are ideas that are not supported by the general public. Okay, these aren't radical. Oh my gosh, they're not like not staunch conservatives. No, this is again to the left of center, and this is who John Cornyn wants advising him on his Family Advisory Council, or I'm sorry, Faith Advisory Council. It's a ploy. It is a ploy, and that's it. And I hope that Texans are aware of that. And I hope that President Trump is aware of that. Not that his evangelical choices have been very good himself, but that's discussion for another day. The EIT is a project of the National Immigration Forum, which received millions in funding from George Soros' Open Societies Foundation and used the NIF as a financial pass-through to spread pro-mass immigration messaging among evangelical communities. I want to be clear. Okay, we're talking about an organization that is trying to disguise itself around or with the illusion of faith. Oh, sure, they got pastors. Okay, they got biblical professors and doctors. They got real true devout Christians who are just seem to be okay with going against biblical doctrines such as nationalism, which is biblical, to be clear. Okay, the whole idea, open borders, that's in the Bible. No. Actually, it's not. It's nowhere in the Bible. Okay, let's not try to conflate the modern day leftist perception of what Jesus represented with today's politics. That's the pathway to very dangerous areas. And once you throw in the fact that George Soros is funding all this, that should be ding, 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 ring every possible bell that you need rung, and just in case you weren't sure whether or not Cornyn was aligning himself with the wrong people. Pardon me. Ali Noorani, who led the National Immigration Forum from 2008 to 2022, publicly praised Cornyn in 2021. So this isn't his first rodeo with these guys, for sponsoring amnesty legislation, highlighting the senator's longstanding alignment with open borders advocacy. Graham, that's Dr. Graham, and Pastor Liccardo are also signatories to the EIT's Evangelical Statement of Principles for Immigration Reform, which explicitly calls for chain migration policies and a citizenship pathway for those in the country illegally. Again, there's nothing about this that is Christian. There's nothing about this that is American. There's nothing about this that is Texan. And there's definitely nothing about this that is MAGA or even really Republican. This is a full-blown Rhino, Democrat-run operation. And John Cornyn is embracing it. He's promoting it, and he's using it to try to promote himself to fool the masses, or as many of them as are willing to be fooled into thinking that, oh, he's such an evangelical, he's such a Christian, he's reading his Bible and taking cues from that, and that's why he wants to give illegal aliens amnesty. I really wish that Paxton didn't have so much baggage. I really like the guy, and I acknowledge that he's made some enemies, and not necessarily in a good way. A lot of times you're going to make enemies. I've made lots of enemies in my life for my opinions, but it seems like Paxton has made some appropriate and right enemies. But others, it's like there was no reason to even go down that road. I'm not going to dwell on it. I'm just going to say that he has baggage that isn't all just, it's because he's such a staunch conservative or such a MAGA guy. No, he made some blunders, I think, in his career. Pissed off some people that it wasn't necessary. Didn't promote the America First cause. Didn't promote the Texas First cause. It just, he let it get to him. He got personal at times. And again, not going to dwell. I just wish, because if it wasn't for that baggage, I think it's a slam dunk, no brainer. Of course, President Trump is endorsing him. Probably endorses him before the primary, and maybe is able to eliminate the need for a runoff altogether. Just get rid of Cornyn, the backstabbing snake, anti-Trump, anti-Republican, anti-American, anti-Texas guy that he is, and focus on Paxton. But like I said, Paxton's got some baggage. We've got to overcome it. But I don't think it's impossible. Back to the article. This is not Cornyn's first controversy over immigration group ties. A video previously surfaced of him praising LULAC, L-U-L-A-C, a left-leaning organization that has fought Texas sanctuary city bans, backed abortion advocacy, and helped illegal immigrants resist federal deportation efforts. To say that Cornyn is a snake is not just about his stances pertaining to MAGA or Donald Trump. He's a snake for Texas. I mean, he continues to bite Texas in the butt, and they continue to promote him. He's a good politician. He's a horrible, horrible person, and terrible Republican, and not a conservative at all. The revelations raise questions, serious questions, about Cornyn's credibility on immigration enforcement among conservative Texas voters, particularly as he faces Paxton, a Trump-line candidate, in what is shaping up to be a defining primary battle. Now, President Trump deferred. He punted, and he did it the right way. He said, look, I'm not going to cast I'm not going to give an endorsement on this race or any race until we pass the Save America Act. Amen, brother, for that. Now he's saying he's not going to sign any legislation until the next legislation he signs will be the Save America Act, which I covered yesterday why John Thune has a pathway to get there, okay? He does. I know that he says that the talking filibuster wouldn't work, and I tend to agree. It's the consequences of the talking filibuster will outweigh the potential benefits of the passing the Save America Act, and without a guarantee. Look, if you told me that, look, we're basically going to shut down the Senate for 3 months to get the Save America Act passed, I'm down for that. But what is probably going to end up happening is Senate can be essentially shut down, clogged with talking filibuster play for many, many months, with no guarantee that the Save America Act will eventually get passed, or that he could even be passed before the election. So again, reluctantly, I'm with Thune on that one. But there are pathways through which he can do it. And the only real way to get this done is by eliminating the filibuster altogether. I made the case yesterday for why that should happen. And he does have the pathway to do that without losing face, without pissing everybody off who, like me, I'm in favor of keeping the filibuster, but not in this case. I wish we could just get rid of it and then put it back in and lock it in. Of course, I would probably regret that, in the future when we need it gone again, but whatever. Point is, we need the government reopened. We need the Save America Act passed. Both of them are extraordinarily popular. Okay? These represent the will of the people, and as such, should represent the will of even those Republicans who would fight against eliminating the filibuster, such as Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, Mitch McConnell's handlers, Weekend at Bernie's there, Rand Paul, Tom Tillis. They probably can't do anything with Tillis, but they can get the others, I think, to temporarily or whatever. I don't know. Figure it out, Thune. This is ridiculous. That's how important it is that we get this done, that I'm hijacking my segment about John Cornyn and inserting the need for the Save America Act and getting rid of the filibuster, opening up the government all the way, getting our TSA agents. As much as I dislike the TSA as a whole, I do want to get the agents paid, and I want to stop the desperate slowdown of travel that's currently happening and all the other repercussions of this Democrat shutdown. Bottom line is this, as far as Cornyn is concerned. Don't buy the hype. Don't believe that he is don't even believe, I wouldn't even say staunch conservative. Don't think that he's a conservative. Don't think that he's a Republican. And don't let him use this newly formed council, the Faith Advisory Council, the FAC. Okay, don't let him use the FAC to make you think that he is some sort of devout Christian. He's a Soros Christian, which means that he's not a Christian at all.
The best coffee out there is from a Christian company. Go to patriot.tv/coffee and lock in.
All right, right, still in Texas. Let's talk about James Tallarico. He's the Democrat nominee for the United States Senate in Texas. He is allegedly a pastor, a Presbyterian pastor, totally woke guy, and maybe the most dangerous politician in the United States of America today. Potential politician. I know he's a politician. He's in the state house or whatever, but if he were to win the U.S. Senate seat in the state of Texas, I would argue that that would mark one of the most important, if not the most important turning point in America's evangelical history. And you might say, wow, Rucker, that's a whole bunch of hyperbole right there. But hear me out, because I think I can make a pretty clear case for it. This is a guy who is flaunting his anti-biblical, quote-unquote, Christian perspectives. He believes there are 6 genders. He believes that God is non-binary, which I know that's one of those ones where if you listen to everything that he's saying in context, it wasn't as bad as it sounds when we say he thinks that God is non-binary. Like he was pointing to how he's not really man or woman and yada, yada, yada. But in context, if we look at what his intent was to attach God's quote-unquote gender to the LGBTQIA plus supremacy movement. In other words, what he said was technically true, not the non-binary part, but his evidence for being non-binary. But this was about promoting, the false rainbow of LGBTQIA plus, not some technicality about God's gender. Anyway, that one's ugly. Perhaps most importantly, he claimed recently that putting the 10 Commandments anywhere, such as schools, is a form of violence. So here's a supposed alleged pastor who believes that the laws of God are violence. He wants Americans to believe that showing kids what God decrees as his forever, his permanent laws of how we as human beings are supposed to act, what the laws that we're supposed to abide by throughout our lives. He says that that's violence. This guy is dangerous, not just as a politician. He's dangerous because of what he represents. He represents the deterioration of proper biblical faith. We can make claims, and I often do, that there are dangers with the Red-Green Alliance, right? You look at people like Zoran Mamdani, who merge Marxism with political Islam and wield it as a powerful weapon, despite the obvious contradictions between radical leftism or Marxism and the tenets of Islam. They shouldn't align, except they align perfectly when we consider just how their enemies are aligned. In other words, they might not necessarily agree with each other, but the goals that they want to achieve are properly aligned. And amongst those goals includes the destruction of the Christian faith here in the United States of America and across the world. And again, that's not hyperbole either. This isn't about kumbaya, let's all live together, whether you're believing in God and Jesus Christ or Allah or Vishnu or whoever. No, this isn't about that. They want to destroy Christians. They do. They really do. And that's always been the case. Whether you're talking about Islam or Marxism, whether you want to call it globalism or powers and principalities, it is the Christian faith that has always been the end goal target. Sure, they go after other components, other aspects of it. For example, taking the 10 Commandments, taking the Bible out of schools. That was not because, we have to have a separation of church and state. It says so in the Constitution. Actually, no, it doesn't. Okay? And actually, the separation of church and state was designed specifically to prevent the state from infecting the church, not the other way around. But that's just, history and facts. Those things aren't important in today's post-truth society. This man, James Tallarico, is more than just a bad politician. He's not more than just a radical Democrat. He's more than just a false pastor. He does represent the deterioration from within, because we can say Islam is a challenge, and it is. We can say that atheism is a challenge, and it is. But the real destruction can only happen from within the church itself. And that destruction, as we've detailed, or no, but it's been detailed in the book of Jude, it's been detailed in both the books of Daniel as well as Revelation, that this is going to happen. Is it going to happen today, right now, here in the United States of America? I don't know. But if it does, James Tallarico may be the key to that, because he perverts the Bible. He perverts the faith. He does it in a way that sure sounds semi-logical sometimes, especially to those who are most influenceable. And that's the big concern here. That's the real fear. Is it not just about, we don't want the Democrats to get a majority in the Senate? No, we don't. But that's secondary to, we don't want the sentiment of many, especially the remaining Democrat Christians, though few they may be, as well as those Christians in the independent or conservative or Republican wings that are lukewarm. They're not quite properly firm in their faith. Maybe they go to church on Sunday, maybe they don't, but they don't practice their faith throughout their week, throughout their lives. And maybe they're not reading their Bible enough. Maybe they're just not solid enough with their faith. And it's people like James Tallarico that can influence them in a direction that takes them to oblivion. And thereby, if this can happen with enough of them, can take our entire nation down in oblivion, or to oblivion. I keep saying that's not hyperbole. It's not hyperbole. But of all of the attacks on the Christian faith over the decades, over the centuries here in the United States of America, there were attacks even in the early days, as stalwart as they were, our founding fathers, there were still challenges when it came to safeguarding the faith. And they found what I believe to be a nearly perfect way to do so. And the way you do it is by protecting all faiths. If you're not going to be a theocracy, which we should not be, then you have to allow for open debate. James Tallarico represents the end of open debate, and he does it from a position of alleged Christian authority. As a pastor, as a Presbyterian pastor, he can make a far greater impact on the direction of faith leaders and their flocks than any pastor, more so than any politician. The kingly priest, right? That's something that has not existed for millennia, not since Melchizedek. And Jesus Christ comes and will come as that new leader who is both a king and a priest. But in the meantime, when you start melding in people like James Tallarico, who will be a false king and a false priest at the same time, now you have the recipe for true disaster. I know that I will rip on John Cornyn all day, and I will, because he's just not a good representative of the United States, of Texas, or of the Republican Party. But would I take him over James Tallarico? If John Cornyn is able to win the primary and beat Ken Paxton, then as much as I dislike him, I see him as an obstacle to making America great again. James Tallarico, I see him as an existential threat for America going forward. I hate to do it, but I'm going to have to burst some bubbles here real quick. There's a lot of you out there who are listening, and you probably heard from other conservative or conspiratorial podcasters out there all about the reopening of the Jeffrey Epstein quote unquote suicide that took place nearly 7 years ago. The reason there's so much excitement is because earlier this week, New York Post and others revealed that one of the guards who was there the night that his body was found, allegedly found, which we're going to throw out allegedly in a lot of this stuff because I'm probably like many of you, not all of you, but many of you aren't buying really anything from this whole official story about Jeffrey Epstein's alleged death. But anyway, she allegedly was there the night that his body was found. And less than an hour before his body was found, she was doing searches for Jeffrey Epstein. What's the latest news? I think latest on Epstein in jail. Those were the searches that she did. And this was less than 40 minutes before his body was found. They also discovered that 10 days prior to his alleged suicide, she had made a $5,000 deposit. And then they were also making a big deal out of the fact that here she is a guard at a prison who was driving around in a high dollar Land Rover or something to that effect. And I get it. Does it all sound suspicious? You betcha. Is it as suspicious as many of the things we already knew, such as cameras being out, guards being incompetent? All of a sudden, this guy's on suicide watch, and yet the one thing that they were supposed to stop, which was suicide, is the one thing that they allegedly could not stop. And of course, there are the reports that Hillary Clinton herself was in the jail, but she was invisible. She was wearing an invisibility cloak at the time before she allegedly personally strangled Jeffrey Epstein to death. And of course, that last part is unconfirmed rumor, from Hogwarts. But still, you get the idea. There's all these things out there, and I want to declare up front, I do believe certain things. Okay, I believe that Jeffrey Epstein, number one, I think there's at least a possibility. It might be slim. I'm not in the same camp as a lot of the conspiracy theorists out there who are like, oh yeah, no, Jeffrey Epstein had they had a fake body ready for him, and he had plastic surgery, and now he's living in like wherever. And you even have some images popping up. It's like, is this Jeffrey Epstein after plastic surgery? Whatever. Number one, if that is the case, then no, we're never, ever, 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 ever going to see him again. Okay, this isn't like 1970s witness protection plastic surgery. This is like for all we know, he could be 2 inches taller, and now he's looks like a Hispanic man. I don't know. Like the technology is there to completely change who he is, change his voice, all of that stuff, right? And that technology has been there for a very long time. If they want to make somebody completely disappear and completely unrecognizable, even to loved ones, that is in the cards. And especially if you've got somebody who they're trying to keep shut up and quiet for forever, such as Jeffrey Epstein. So I'm going to put it at about, I'll be generous and give it a 10% chance, a 1 in 10 chance that he's still alive. 90% chance they killed him. So, but still, I'm telling you, there's a chance that he's still alive. So that part, we'll get that out of the way. Second part, did he commit suicide? I'll reverse my percentage there. I would say it's about a 10% chance that he committed suicide. I'm not going to completely dismiss it and say there's absolutely positively no way that he did, just based upon the series of unfortunate events that took place prior to that. And the only reason I give it a 10% chance and not like a 1% chance, the only reason I give it a 10% chance is because we have to understand the circumstances behind what could drive somebody to suicide. And if he did commit suicide, I would argue that he did so under compulsion of, under threat of something really bad. This guy's a narcissist. He's not prone to committing suicide. And so you could say that technically speaking, he did commit suicide but they threatened to I don't know, whatever they threatened to do with him. So yeah. So I guess there is a small percent. You know what? I'll put it less than 10%. We'll give it a 5% chance because again, all the circumstantial evidence around it, all of the odd coincidences, the series of unfortunate events that led to the ability for him to even be able to allegedly commit suicide, sure points to an ugly conclusion. All that said, this whole thing now, James Comer and the House Oversight Committee, they want to interview this guard, okay, and they want to interview people that were involved, and they want to interview yada yada yada. Look, and I'm just gonna do the whole just asking questions thing here. I'm not really making any accusations, so I don't get sued. But with Bill Barr handling the initial portions of the investigation, is it possible that Bill Barr was compromised? I would argue that if any attorney general in the history of the United States of America was completely compromised by the globalist elite cabal, it would be Bill Barr. That's just sort of like his thing. You know, people can point to all of the horrible selections that President Trump made for his cabinet and the people that he surrounded himself with in his first term. And now we're seeing a handful of the ones, much better than second term, exponentially better. He's got some real winners in there, but he's also still has a few losers involved. Okay, Christine, Pam Bondi. But look, Bill Barr was the worst. I think he was worse than Mike Pence as far as, being so obviously against everything. He's more obvious than Pence was. I think he was worse than Jeff Sessions. I think he was worse than Omarosa. Okay, that's saying a lot. Or Scaramucci. My gosh, the guy lasted like 4 minutes in the position at press secretary. Trump made some pretty bad moves. Okay, don't even get me started on H.R. McMaster. Okay, John Kelly. I could go up and down the list, but of those, William Barr was the worst. William Barr, to me, was actively and aggressively working within the White House to not only disrupt, but to destroy the Trump administration, the MAGA movement. He was there, in my humble opinion, as a plant. I know I said I was only going to ask questions, but here I am making wild accusations. Point being is that with him in charge of the Epstein inquiry, it's done, folks. Okay, we're not going to find anything. Nothing. I mean, it would take an act of God. There's no way that James Comer is going to take this guard who's already been interviewed at least a few times, who's already lied, already claimed, I didn't make that search. Well, actually, yeah, you did. Well, no, I wasn't on the wing. I didn't distribute linens, she said. And then there were reports that, yeah, actually, well, no, you definitely did distribute linens before. She's like, no, I never distributed linens. We're not, but she's already been fired. She's already been, moved on in life. There's nothing they can ask her that's going to reveal anything. And the reason that it's important that you all know this, the reason that I don't want, there are aspects of the Epstein situation that can come out. Discovering who killed him is super, super, super low on the list. Discovering proof that he killed himself, super, super, super low on the list. Not because it's not important. It is important. But because, again, with Bill Barr in charge and then the Biden administration following that up, over 5 years of time to cover all their butts. And now finally we're getting some movement, but it has to come not through the DOJ, not through Pam Bondi, not through Kash Patel, not through anything like that, but through the New York Post. That happened for a reason. It's because nobody cares anymore. Again, not that they don't care whether or not Jeffrey Epstein killed himself or if he's still alive or if somebody else killed him or why he was killed or anything like that. I'm not saying that's not important or that nobody cares about that. I'm saying that nobody cares enough there will be no conclusion to that. Unless God deems it so. That's it. We can't uncover this one. Nothing that we do, nothing that we press, no questions that we ask will yield the result. However, we can and should continue to pursue the bad guys that are still alive, which is, to me, more important. Okay? I think it's more important that we figure out how to charge and arrest and prosecute and jail Bill Gates, Leon Black, anyone who was involved in Epstein, as well as those who were involved in helping him. It's starting to come out, thanks to Nancy Mace and others, it's starting to come out that there were, quote unquote, victims of his who then became, quote unquote, madams. They were out there recruiting for him. Okay? So should they be held to account? You betcha. People might say, "Oh, you got to be sympathetic to them because they were just young girls and they were brainwashed." And it's like, look, okay, I get it. They were young, but they weren't like 8, okay, and then groomed for a decade and brainwashed. No, these were girls who, in many cases, I'm not trying to take away from their victimhood, okay, not by any means, but they were, 14, 15, 16, whatever. They were teens, most of them, from what we know. And they were paid, most of them, from what we know, okay? And they weren't like thrown into a van and kidnapped. They came willingly. Were they even allowed to make that decision? No, of course not. They were minors. They couldn't make the decision to do whatever with Prince Andrew, but they did, okay? But then once they become adults, once they're basically too old to play on Epstein Island, they continued. They chose to make money by recruiting more girls, recruiting their own replacements, recruiting victims. And so should they be punished? You betcha. You betcha. I'm not trying to be unsympathetic. Do I think that they should get the same punishment as Bill Gates or Bill Clinton or Bill whoever? No, of course not. They're not at the same league, but they do still exist as culprits in all this. We have before us an opportunity, and it's not just about finding criminals and putting them away. That's a huge part of it. But what this really allows us, if we can persevere, get the information out, well, first discover the information, then get the information out, despite any of the other distractions that are happening in the world, focusing on this, getting the information out, we have an opportunity to really do damage to the globalist elite cabal. We have the opportunity to locate current operations. Epstein was not the only one out there. He might have been the biggest, we don't know for sure, might have been the biggest, but is he the only one? No. Gosh, no. You don't think CIA and Mossad and GCHQ and everybody else, they don't have their own little versions of Epstein or even big versions of Epstein? What about China? What about Russia? What about any of these? I mean, this has been part of intelligence gathering and espionage for years. It's been part of the whole blackmail. How do you take control of powerful people, powerful politicians, businessmen? This is it. Okay? This is how it's done. And now that it's being exposed, this is the opportunity to go after the power brokers, the globalist elite cabal, and their control over things. I would argue that through Epstein, you can make, and it's a stretch because there's absolutely zero evidence to prove this, but I would argue that it's definitely possible that Epstein or someone like him was able to gather information on many, many, many of the leaders in Europe, which is one of the reasons why these European leaders are now being, for whatever reason, we don't know for sure, but they are giving away their continent. They're betraying their own people. They are allowing the takeover of their lands for apparently no reason. And they're doing everything in their power to cover up anything bad. None of this makes any sense, what's happening in Europe. And you might say, well, how does that tie into Jeffrey Epstein? I would argue that they have to be compromised in some way. Either they are direct parts of the globalist elite cabal. In other words, they are in some way demonically or satanically influenced. That's possible. Or they've been promised, hey, you're going to help us destroy Europe. Okay, but it's okay because we're going to protect you and your family. As a matter of fact, we're going to get a little island set up for you. It's going to be great. You're going to love it. Or they're being completely blackmailed because of stuff that happened on Epstein Island or anywhere else. Okay? Those are the three viable possibilities. The fourth possibility is the one that to me is not viable. That they just don't realize that it's happening. That they're okay with it. As Europeans, they're thinking to themselves, oh yeah, no, what we really need here is a bunch more rapists and murderers. That's going to make Europe great again. No, they don't think that. They know that they're destroying it. They have to. They're not stupid. They may be many things, including evil, but they're not stupid. We have a globalist elite cabal, a new world order, powers and principalities, whatever you want to call it. We have the globalist enemies to fight. And I believe that Jeffrey Epstein is the key, or at least one of the key, not the key. There's many keys, but he is one of the keys. And I think that this is part of what we, not all of you out there, not all of you listening are going to want to participate or even need to participate, but some of us feel the need and the, I would believe, a righteous desire to expose things ahead of whatever events are to come. If you do believe that we are in the biblical end times, which I think we're either there or just about to be there, it's coming soon or already here, right? If you are like me and you feel that, then you should feel, to some extent, a need, a desire, a calling to expose this stuff. And that's what I think we have the opportunity to do. Will interviewing a security guard who may or may not have been compromised 7 years ago, is that going to get us closer? No. There are other aspects of the Epstein scenario that make more sense for us to pursue. That's all I'm getting at here, because I keep seeing it. You had Rogan debating Schellenberger about this. We've got bigger fish to fry with Epstein. Let's not focus on whether or not the security card, how she got her $5,000, or why she was driving her Land Rover. And if you say, oh, well, but that could be the pathway through which we could find that. No. They wouldn't have. Trust me, if they thought that this lady who was dim-witted enough to do searches on Google prior to his alleged death, who's depositing $5,000 into her bank account to get flagged by the bank, which she was, if you think that she has the keys and that she wouldn't be alive, okay, or she wouldn't be findable, we'll say, if she had posed any risk at all to the power brokers. This is another distraction. It's a waste of time. We have to pray about this. We have to discern paths forward, and we have to pray that by golly, pray that the truth comes out. It's God's will that will allow this, and only God's will. If the truth is not supposed to come out, so be it. It will be because God says that the truth is not supposed to come out. But if it can come out, then we must pray for that. We must. And we must strive to get that information out, because at the end of the day, do you really trust Pam Bondi to get it out? I mean, is she better than Bill Barr? We think so. Is she better than Mayorkas? Well, yeah, she is. But is she good enough to actually expose any of this stuff? To really start breaking open the dam of information? No, she's not. I'm not sure if most Americans realize just how precarious our current situation is when it comes to farming. Ranchers, farmers across the nation are having challenges that are hitting them from multiple directions. And this is before, keep in mind, this was a challenge prior to the attack on Iran that has created more challenges, more risks for farmers, particularly with fertilizer and energy costs, which we'll discuss here shortly. But even before the war, we were facing challenges. Keep in mind that from the pandemic on, during the Biden regime, they were faced with just tremendous setbacks, not just from policy, not just from poor economic status, but also from the way that businesses and corporations handled farming. There's been a consolidation, and there continues to be a consolidation, where small and medium-sized farmers and ranchers are being attacked. And it's not the type of attack where oh, that's illegal, or it's more of a, we'll call it a corporate and foreign attack. There have been some strides lately, attempts to alleviate their challenges by the Trump administration. Farmers are really loving Trump, but again, there's always pushback, and sometimes it's pushback not just from the left or not just from the globalists, but just as an example, when President Trump signed the executive order declaring glyphosate to be whatever crucial, I forgot the exact phrase, but basically where he was promoting the use of glyphosate, which is essentially Roundup, for farmers, making it a point of national security. There was pushback, including by me, okay, to be fair, pushback from the Maha movement, pushback from pretty much everybody in the conspiracy side of things, a whole bunch of people from the conservative side. We didn't like it because glyphosate has been the enemy that we've been attacking for years, and now all of a sudden, President Trump is embracing it. He even had RFK Jr. going around and saying, look, we still think that glyphosate is poison, but it's a necessary poison. Those weren't his exact words, but that's basically what he was saying. He said, look, if we were to go after and eliminate glyphosate altogether, then the farming infrastructure in the United States of America would collapse overnight. And he's correct. And that's not to say I really, really wish, and I said this in the previous show, I really wish that they would have come out and just said, hey, guess what? Glyphosate sucks. We're going to work to replace it, to get rid of it, to wean America off of it. Here's the steps that are going to take place. But in the meantime, we're stuck with it. So, suck it up. Source your food better. That would have been better than just, hey, we need glyphosate because it might be killing you, but at least we're not dying from it or something. I don't know how they were wording it. And again, these are all challenges that farmers and ranchers were facing before the war. Now, all of a sudden, as we have noted over at economiccollapse.report, now the farming crisis is deepening, and it's not making national news. You're not getting a whole lot of people talking about it because obviously there are other things that are happening. But between war, energy prices, and debt, which is a whole other aspect of farming that I don't think people, non-farmers, really understand, they're being squeezed. Okay, they're being pushed out. They're struggling to survive. And if we lose the farmers, we lose the nation. That's not hyperbole. We have that article, as I noted, over at economiccollapse.report. It's not too long of an article, but I'm not going to read it for you. I'm just going to go over some of the bullet points. Rising oil prices linked to the Middle East tensions, war, are increasing the costs of fuel, which are obvious, fertilizer, which may be obvious to most of my amazing audience, and transportation for American farmers. In other words, the Strait of Hormuz, we already know, very well aware that it accounts for, 20% of the world's oil production. But even though we're seeing the gas prices go up as a result, it's not like we're going to be short on oil in the immediate future. Other nations will be, though. Other nations are. And that's the big challenge. That's what's pushing the price of oil so high. Will it continue? That depends. President Trump has been using the military to take out the boats that are trying to drop mines. I remember when I first saw, oh my gosh, they're mining it. I was like, holy crap. This is it. This is the big bad. Even if we get rid of them, there's going to be these mines all across the Strait of Hormuz. But a report that I read, and there may be a new report out, but the report, as a matter of fact, I didn't read it. I saw it on a clip. I believe it was from Fox News or Newsmax, where they stated that thus far only about 10 mines had been dropped and that they can be found. In other words, it's not mined yet. We're not doomed yet from Iranian actions, and the president has been taking out their boats, taking out their navy, taking out pretty much everything he can. With obviously Pete Hegseth and the military are doing all of this to try to make sure that when the dust settles, when Iran is finally thoroughly weakened to the point to where they can't really stop what's happening in the Strait of Hormuz, then they'll be able to open up the shipping lines, and we'll get back to cheaper oil and hopefully a lot of fertilizer. Because keep in mind, don't forget that fertilizer itself is extremely tied to obviously nitrogen and the natural gas, and a lot of that does flow through the Strait of Hormuz. Oddly enough, coming from even European areas, including Ukraine. So that's been an issue, a concern for years, and this Iranian war has made things even more precarious. Farm debt has climbed to record levels, putting many producers in a vulnerable financial position if commodity prices fall. And that's actually not the best way to put it. Because of the debt, because farmers are mounting their debts just to make sure that they have the equipment, the materials, the personnel, the land. They're really hoping for their debt is based upon all things going very well, and as I noted, at least for the last 4 or 5 years, things have not been going very well for them, and that makes it challenging when the debt itself is accounting for basically the profits and for smaller farms, even the living expenses that are required to be able to be a farmer, to be a rancher, to maintain even a meager lifestyle. Farmers, generally speaking, are not rich. And if they are, then chances are they're rich for other reasons other than farming. It really is a true labor of love. Even if they don't love it, they do. They just don't realize it. That's a discussion for another day. That's really more of a biblical discussion, as a matter of fact. Small and mid-sized farms are under the greatest pressure as consolidation continues across the agriculture sector. There are very few industries where corporate squeeze is more powerful. This is the reason why there has been such a consolidation across, and has been going on for decades, a consolidation of food companies. It makes sense for, just as an example, it makes sense for McDonald's to buy up as many potato farms as possible. And I'm not trying to paint McDonald's as bad. I mean, they are. I would never eat there ever. But from a business perspective, yeah, sure, it makes sense. If they're going to be selling a quadrillion fries a year, they might as well, instead of buying the potatoes from somebody else, they might as well own the potato farms, right? That's the type of consolidation that's hurting. But it's not just from companies like McDonald's. It's from Chinese companies and other foreign nationals buying up farmland anywhere they can. It's from those who have odd motives, we'll say. I mean, why would Bill Gates buy up so much farmland, millions of acres across the nation, but then not actually use it, in most cases, to produce food? What's going on there? What are the globalists doing? We already know what the Chinese Communist Party are doing. They really, at least part of what they're doing, is they just want land that they can use to spy on the U.S. military. But when it comes to people like Bill Gates, when it comes to the things that don't make sense, it really just makes you scratch your head and wonder, what in the world is the globalist elite cabal thinking? And I almost don't want the answer. But I'm fibbing. I do. I want the answers. I always want the answers, as should you. Supply chain instability from global conflicts could raise costs for farm equipment and imported agricultural inputs. Food inflation may accelerate if farmers reduce planting or livestock production due to rising expenses. And that's the other challenge. It's not just about, it's not a binary yes or no. You got a farm, you don't have a farm. How a farm operates is determined by the economy, determined by the weather in some cases. Okay, droughts or not droughts, feast or famine. But it can also be directly influenced by cost. In other words, I believe it was, I'm trying to think, it was in California. I'm trying to think, what was the crop? Was it, I just saw this a couple of weeks ago. I think I might have even have talked about it. It's old age, right? Happens to us. What in the world? There was a crop where, oh goodness, basically they were producing it out here in California, and the farmer had to pay to sell. In other words, like his actual the money that he received for the food was less than the cost that he had to pay to produce the food. wasn't walnuts. It wasn't. I don't think it was avocados. Goodness gracious, I'll have to look that up. But it was anecdotal, and it was a single farmer, but it wasn't. It was major too. Like it wasn't like oh he's doing like he's got this tiny farm. No, it was actually a pretty decent size, a mid-sized farm. And again, it's like the more food he produced, the more money he lost. And those considerations have to be taken into account. That's why, just like with oil, just like with a lot of things, you don't just produce the max amount. You have to produce the right amount. The right amount to go with supply and demand, the right amount to match the prices, the right amount to, at the very least, break even, if not turn a profit. This does hearken to the biblical principles of stewardship. We always talk about the land. There's not nearly enough emphasis made on the land itself, and throughout the Bible, especially in the Old Testament, but also in the New Testament. God was very clear and is very clear about the importance of land, and not just land ownership, not just taking care of the land, not just letting the land rest every now and then, and getting rejuvenated and regenerating. There's a lot that we can learn about farming in general, but it really does come down to full-blown stewardship of the land itself. This is God's land, wherever we are. It's not just the land of Israel and Jerusalem, and that's specifically God's land, right? But all land is God's. It is decreed. It was let me get it. It was Psalm 24:1. The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, the world, and they that dwell therein. We are stewards of the land. We might own it on paper. A farmer might own his farm, might have the deed and all that stuff. We walk on the Lord's planet. We walk on the Lord's soil. And the food that is given to us as a gift from the Lord, the food, the nutrients, everything. We need to take care of it, and not just for the sake of profit, and not just for the sake of making sure that we've got enough food on our tables. We are stewards of this land, and it has the ability, if we treat it right, to deliver not just sustenance but abundance. Unfortunately, we as a species have tended to fall away from that. I'm a huge fan of taking personal responsibility as much as possible. And for those who have the means and the resources and the ability and the time, I know it's asking a lot, but if, in an ideal scenario, I would be living on a homestead of some sort. I would be treating my land that I'm the steward of as a place to grow my own food, to produce for my family, to share with others when I'm able. And that's something that I wish more and more people would do. I wish that we had 100 times, 1,000 times more farmers than we do today, even if they're small. Just here in the United States of America alone, and then I wish that trend would continue outward. We can and should be in the business of producing the things that God has given us, the natural components. And it's not just about food. It can be about cotton. It can be about so many things. Taking advantage of these blessings and being, again, proper stewards. This is, of course, supposed to... sometimes, I've been doing a lot of these different types of podcasts every day. And I have to always remember that, stay on point with the topic. This is Economic Collapse Report segment for the podcast. But I tend to always end up pointing towards the Bible, because that is the most important thing. Again, we can talk about the food component of it, but it really is the miracle of it, the spiritual and biblical miracle of food itself. I mean, you plant something, you plant a seed, And you wait and you water it and you nurture it and you let the sunshine do its work and the soil do its work and the water do its work, and hopefully not the glyphosate or the Roundup, because you're doing it all organic, regenerative if possible. And it sprouts, it pops up out of the ground, and then all of a sudden you've got something wonderful that you can eat. It's not like it's a sacrifice. Especially here in the United States, we've grown so accustomed to ultra processed foods. I'm not going to lecture you, but my goodness, if just going back and eating food, especially if you can grow it yourself, it really truly is. If you haven't done it lately, it's amazing. If you haven't done it at all, it's really truly amazing. I remember the first time my wife grew a tomato that we were able to eat during dinner. This was decades ago, and it legitimately tasted different, and it tasted better, and it was beautiful. It was beautiful. So remember, take care of our farmers, take care of our land, and let's try to alleviate any of the potential risks that are associated with everything that's going on in the world. If we lose the farmers, if we lose the ranchers, we'll lose the United States of America, period.